Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Borderline Genius. Thanks again for joining us, whether you're tuning into YouTube or watching us on where you listen to your podcast. Awesome that we're up to episode 7, and super pumped to have the guys from Quokka Games on today, Ando and Jono, the dream team. By way of introduction, quickly, my name's Andrew. I'm the creator of this little game, Footy Feud, that's AFL licensed and also a soon-to-be Marvel game as well. Really, the intent behind this podcast and video series is to give back to the community and to give aspiring or established game designers hopefully some tips and tricks in terms of what we've learned on the journey. So guys, fantastic to have you on this evening. First time we've had a dynamic duo on at the same time, so welcome to the show. So I guess, guys, like a good place to start is like we met up at a convention a few weeks ago. Just really keen to hear a bit more about how you got into designing games in the first place and where the inspiration came from.
So we're sitting together now in Brisbane, but this is not it was like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was during COVID, and Ando was living in Canberra. So because of the pandemic, we were like a bit bored, and we were talking about traveling, and we couldn't travel, and we're like packing, and then we're like, what if we gamified packing? It was just a conversation, and then I went away for a week. I went I guess I designed like a sort of game, and then I took it back to him, and then gave him my spiel, and then he was like, "Oh, maybe we could turn it into a game." And then
and so that's where Carry On kind of started with forming.
Carry On, the first one.
So Carry On's a game based on packing, as Jono just mentioned. The idea is you want to pack up to the 23 or 32 kilogram limit. The more you pack, the more points you get. But if you go over, you have to pay an excess baggage fee. And so with that idea, we just kept expanding it and started play testing it.
Yeah, tested with our friends. We got the close friend bubble that we could hang around with. We didn't want to, get
Spread
COVID, but yeah.
That's fantastic. I think, guys, that there's so much to unpick there in itself, but even like to start from the genesis of it, like wanting to gamify packing, like where did the inspiration to even gamify something begin with?
We both enjoy playing board games and card games and console games in general. As John mentioned before, 2 years ago, we were living in separate cities, myself in Cameron, John in Brisbane, and I couldn't visit Brisbane anymore because of lockdown. And so we missed playing games, and then we just started talking about playing games and traveling at the same time. And that's where the idea kind of just flashed and merged. And we're like, let's make a travel game.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like so thematically relevant for the time, right? Like a lot of us had different extents of lockdown, but for everybody listening from overseas or watching from overseas, we had really harsh interstate border restrictions as well. It wasn't just you couldn't come into the country or out of the country. Like the state border, or even in some cases where I live in Melbourne, there was a real kind of ring of steel, as the government called it, between metro areas and regional areas. So, I think that's great inspiration for say, hey, you can have fun in an environment where we had to be pretty creative with how we enjoyed ourselves. I think on that point as well, like as you say, you're there together now. How did you then find the process of designing something from scratch, like while you're in lockdown, while you're in different states? You're doing it for the first time as well, right? So like run us through how you fumbled your way through the journey to begin with in really trying circumstances.
Yeah, I guess I was the nerdy one, and I just like started brainstorming different ideas and just because it's a drafting game, and I previously played like Sushi Go and then some other ones, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and there wasn't any good drafting games out there. So I was like, oh, why not try and recreate that? And that's how it kind of started. And then it's had a lot different numbers here and there, and then I don't know, I just took it away for a week, came back to Ando, and then he said, yeah, maybe it might work. So
Yeah.
I said the same thing again, but yeah,
So
that's how it started.
I think in terms of balancing it between two cities, it really required us to both kind of visualize it in our heads when we're talking about the games.
Yeah.
So Jono would come back with his idea after that week, and then I would just try to visualize how that game would work. And then I'll be like, no, hold on, this mechanic is not balancing right. Maybe we can try and add this in. And so we try to balance it as much as possible in our minds. Then we're like, hold on, we can't just keep doing this virtually.
Yeah.
Then Jono kind of went off and then
Prototypes
the first batch. And then he
all hand drawn.
He did a bit of bit of artwork, and then he got it printed and then shipped a copy to us because you can still send stuff during COVID.
Yeah.
And so then we each had a copy of the very first version of the game, and then we just started play testing amongst our individual friendship groups.
Yeah.
And then we'll more or less try and catch up over the phone and discuss like, okay, which mechanics worked with this group of friends, which didn't, where did it balance or where it didn't balance, and then we'll just try to refine it, rejig the rules a bit here and there between the two different games. I think there was quite a few phone calls just trying to work out how to get the balance right, and a lot of mental visualization of the other person's games.
Yeah, it's a really good call, right? Like in terms of even embarking on the playtesting journey for the first time, like did you have a set of like formal rules and criteria that you're almost holding yourself to, or like what you wanted to get out of those sessions? Was it almost just, here's a game, guys, let's just play and see how, like, yeah, how structured versus unstructured was it? I guess it's probably the crux of my question. So kind of,
Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I think we had a game designed already after the first set of rules. Then we used that set of rules and just went to our friends and go, let's play this new game I designed. And we just kind of see how it worked. And because it was like the first play test, we knew that it wasn't perfect from the get-go. And our friends were more than happy to, I guess, give us constructive feedback. Even during the play testing, we're like, wait, hold on, this person is building up so much points now. This is not balanced. How do we try and balance it? And I think the distance also helps because I had my own friendship group, Jono had his own friendship group. We all had different comments. At times they were conflicting, which actually meant that our game design was actually not too bad. Because if it works for some and doesn't work for others, then I guess there's different strategies.
Yeah, so the same scenarios were working for him, same scenarios were working for me. So I think the different numbers of players went into that factor. And then we were like taking the bits that worked and then try to, I guess, push that and make that more relevant, and take out the bits that didn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was going to be one kind of question that I was thinking about, like just how uniform the feedback was, or like we can probably get a bit more pointed, right? Like when you did have conflict, you said that was both a good and a bad thing because the game was playing in a different set of scenarios. It probably enabled different choices. But how did you resolve that conflict? Or then how did you pressure test further to then confirm either of your hypotheses on whether it was a good thing or a not so good thing?
Asking about a game that we developed like a couple of years ago. I'm finding it very hard to answer those questions. Like, what happened 2 years ago? We've made like so many more games afterwards, and that's kind of like dropped off our radar kind of.
Yeah. Well, I guess then with one of the more recent games, then like I guess probably the first question then there is, do you still do playtesting independently, or has one of you taken the lead on doing the playtesting part of the value chain?
No, we still play test individually because different friendship groups they play the games differently. Some would be more casual gamers, others would be very strategic, and that gives us a good sense of how well the game plays for different sets of people. So, for example, with Yamcha, like we'll play with our parents, and they'll play very casually, just building sets of dumplings, and they'll just be happy to finish a hand, regardless of how many points they get. Whereas other groups of friends, they'll try and strategize how to maximize their points, or they'll try and strategize how to finish the game quickly or play safely and just use takeaway cards. And so it mixes up the dynamics quite a lot. And I think playing with a variety of people actually helps, because it shows that the game can work in different scenarios. And so, yeah, we try to play separately, and on occasions, of course, we play within our shared friendship group.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting, right? That, as you say, different gamers are on the spectrum of really casual to really hardcore, right? Like there's a broad spectrum out there, and understanding how your game is played by different people or different sets of people will produce really unique feedback. And then that the different feedback, I guess, then you have to pressure test to think like, hey, is that feedback that we like, or is that feedback that, just means that potentially our game isn't well suited to these type of users, but it's really well suited to these type of users, and these guys hate this mechanic, but these guys love this mechanic, so we're okay with it. How about when you find that, like, maybe Jono, you're testing with casual gamers, and Ando, you're testing with casual gamers, and there's actually a mechanic there that you can't delineate between it's the type of gamer that is producing the polarizing outcome, but it's actually just some people like it and some people are challenged by it. How do you then reach a consensus in that situation?
I guess it comes down to what the mechanic or the scenario was, and then we figure out if the target market, because we're trying to target the casual person that doesn't play games and introduce them into board games, which is why we're trying to do this, because we want to grow this board game industry. Think about our target audience, and our target audience is the casual gamers or the people that don't play games, and we're trying to get them to join the board game industry that way. So we try to pick up the mechanics that are, I guess, probably easier for them, or for maybe easier in terms of like understanding. So maybe not have like some more hardcore game mechanics that they may not understand, and then we probably go with the easier one. I think that's our
Yeah. So I think just echoing what Jono said really, and rephrasing it, is we're trying to design gateway games and make our rules nice and simple. And so when we do have conflicting, I guess, opinions or feedback from our friends, we always take a step back and go, hold on, how do we make this game simple so that people understand it? And so we don't always necessarily take one person's opinion over another. It's more so going back to the roots of how do we make this simple and fun? Which aspect of our games do people enjoy and have fun? Because I think we both enjoy watching people play our games and have lots of fun. And when people react well, like laugh out very loudly or yell very loudly and use curse words when they play dirty laundry, we know that we've hit the right mark.
Yeah, that's the most rewarding part, when our friends or the playtesters have a ball, have a good time, then we're like, yeah, we're onto something.
100%, right? Because like it's objective. Like that's an objective insight, right? To show that, okay, great, like I'm catching on to something. I haven't told them to like it. I haven't created an artificial environment where they're producing a stage reaction, right? Like you can see that authenticity in front of them. I think that, like, for me, the key insight or the takeaway there is just your articulation that, like, we're producing gateway games, and how you then distill that feedback that's not necessarily just on this specific mechanic or that specific mechanic. It's an interpretation of viewing it through the prism of this is a gateway game where we want people to be able to pick it up and play it simply and enjoy it. Is this producing a barrier to here, and hence what has to change? And I think, like, that's just such powerful feedback for anybody going through the playtesting process, right? Where it's not just taking everything random comments, because then you're going to get 100 different comments, and then you need to go through a journey as to which ones do you like, which ones don't you like, then you're auditing the feedback. But viewing it through a prism, like, what do we want our brand to be known for? And then more micro, this game to be known for. Okay, great. What has to change? Or are we actually comfortable with this piece of feedback here? Because you know what? Like, it's just the wrong audience. And that's how you get to pressure test it that way. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I know that for some skeptics among the community, there's a big kind of delineation between playtesting with friends and family versus playtesting with people who you're meeting for the first time at a convention. Help me understand, and the broader community understand, like, what's your objective in kind of how then you go about play testing with one group versus the other? Like, are your expectations different? Are you, or how also do you create an environment where you feel like those closest to you can still produce an authentic reaction as opposed to, they just tell you what you want to hear?
Very good question. I think obviously when you play test at conventions or playing the game the first time at conventions, people won't hold back about how they react to your games. And so it's very genuine in that regards. And it's always good to see people enjoy our games. And so you kind of hit the mark. In terms of friends and whether they are just being nice because you've made a game and friends are supposed to be supportive and say that your games are great, I just remind them to just be honest. And so a few of my friends would just try and probably try and critique every aspect of the game more so than people at conventions. They'll put their critical thinking hat on and just try and break our game from all aspects. And so I think just delivering that message to them really helps. Like, don't censor your feedback.
Yeah, so that's what I do. I tell them straight away, tell me like one or two things that you don't like about it, and tell me something that you like about it. Like, just give them like some guidelines that generally helps.
Yeah.
Then they'll like think about something bad to say, and then But I guess it's like the opposite of what people usually think. I think friends are better at being honest than strangers. Strangers will be a little bit, this person put their heart and soul into this. I don't want to, criticize it, unless it's like completely like a review or something that's detached. But if it's like someone in person, like face to face, I don't think they would say it honestly.
It's a really good call, and again, I think that's fantastic insight, and thanks for sharing that, guys. That really resonates with me, because I always play test with friends and family before I'm like game enough to then show it to the broader world afterwards, right? But I think that as long as you have friends and you cultivate that environment there, that they feel comfortable being authentic and honest with you, like, just creating that environment is then one part of it, to kind of remind that you got to be cruel to be kind. So guys, be cruel and I'll treat it with kindness. But then, Jono, I love your build as well, that you don't need this massive checklist to successfully playtest. Like, just tell me one or two things, right? Like, at the end of the day, like this, and it gets back to the themes of your games, right? Like, the simpler the better, right? Like, as long as they get to the crux of sometimes your first reaction, or often your first reaction is the best reaction. Like, just one simple thing, what's a pro, what's a minus, then you're going to make sure you're getting balanced feedback as a result of it. So, I think that's absolutely fantastic. To kind of close the theme of playtesting, we've mentioned here, we spoke to Dirty Laundry to begin with, and then you're 4 games in now, and with Yumchar as well. There we are. Fantastic. Get them all in. Has your has your journey with playtesting evolved at all? So you still do it independently and kind of collate notes back and discuss what you like and don't like, etc. But yeah, have you kind of even nuanced that process even further based on what's worked?
I think we had the chance yet to try that because we haven't. Ando's just moved back to Brisbane, so we haven't play tested together yet.
Okay, yeah.
So we're yet to experience that.
I mean, in saying that, just to give a plug to our new game, Bobber Master,
Yeah,
I was in town last Christmas, and I think we started playing that a bit more, and I was probably putting on my extremely critical hat on, and the game wasn't functioning completely, it wasn't polished. And so a lot of our friends enjoyed it already, but I just felt there was a missing element in it. And so I think, well, in terms of our game design process, I think Jono designs it, and then I'm always the one who tries to break it. And so with Bobber Master, I put on a very hard hat on where I was like, there's something missing in this game. And then it, yeah, I had to go away and then think about it for quite a while and then tweaked one of the rules. And then that slight tweak actually made the game work very well. And so I think going forward, when we test more games between the two of us, I think, yeah, we'll probably try and continue that, let Jono kind of go off and design his game and then bring that game to me afresh. And then I will try and break it as much as
Fantastic.
possible.
Yeah. And where I like that is now we've got a part of the process that you both kind of do 50-50 in play testing, but you've got very different roles in terms of how the concept comes to life. I guess like within that as well, Ando, like when you're trying to break it, do you then try to then come up with a solve afterwards, or is it more like problem, like for lack of a better word, like problem identification that then Jono, you still then take the lead on? Okay, like this has emerged. You're the one who then works out the solve from there.
Bit of both. So
Okay, yeah,
once I try and identify the problem, I also try and come up with the fix.
yeah,
Tweak the rules because I know that Jono is attached to his rules because every designer is attached to their own rules.
yeah,
And so I try to resolve the problem where I can, and we'll have discussions and just play test that extra new rule or add in new cards or remove X cards and just trying to balance it. And so, yeah, I think we try to put on multiple hats on at different times.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like, I guess Jono, like, how does that process work for you as well? Like we talk about play testers and how it's all about encouraging honesty to get robust feedback back. But from your brother and partner in crime, like you've got to lean into having challenging conversations as well, right? And being willing to have your iteration being picked apart. So how have you become more comfortable with that? And how does it still result in a net benefit where you can see that's progressing something forward as opposed to, feeling like you're being ripped to shreds? Right.
I think it's come from a lot of experience because I from at uni I experienced a lot of feedback like criticism, and then I guess from work as well I get a lot of criticism that way, and then I'm like, okay, this I can't take it personally. I have to like take it as constructive feedback,
Yeah.
and I think I've just built up a thick skin.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the game, at the end of the day, we both have the same shared objective. We want our games to be fun and something that everyone will enjoy. So we kind of just try not to hold on to our original designs too much, and take each other's feedback on, provided that it's improving the game.
Yeah.
And again, just going back to the original point of just making sure the game is nice and simple for everyone to enjoy. Just going back to that core, I guess, goal of Quokka Games.
100%. Like it's always seeing the big picture. It's like, if you go down a rabbit hole, be it play testing or feedback or constructive criticism or how do we solve this, it's then going back to the bigger picture. Like, why are we doing this? What's the goal, to use that phrase? But then also, like, I think to that point, John, like you do need some thick skin and you do need some resilience in it as well, right? And that's something that the play testing part of it, let alone the full commercialization of bringing something to life, which we'll move on to now. But I think they're just fantastic skills. And I think that the thing that I like how you mentioned there as well is like this pursuit's a side hobby for a lot of us. You can take some skills that you learn in your professional life and how that fits into game design as well, right? Like it might not necessarily be, that life as a sales leader or life as an economist. I think there are probably some benefits that helps with commercializing game design in there, but it's what's that mindset and what are some of those softer skills that also help round out the whole development curve and how you successfully bring something to life. So, and thanks also, guys, for being really vulnerable and sharing that, right? Like, communicating to a broader audience how you open yourselves up for feedback and criticism for the greater good is a pretty courageous thing to share. So, yeah, thanks very much.
It's okay.
Well, I guess, guys, like moving on to like spending a lot of good time on playtesting, which is great. But okay, let's now progress to you're at a stage where Ando, you've ripped the game to absolute shreds. You've rebuilt it. It's still a gateway game. It's simple. It's fun. Where to from there? You think you have a finished product? Help me understand your process, again, how you divide and conquer, how you move from that step to ultimately getting towards a finished good.
Um, I think once we get a game that we know is working, our friends are enjoying it, we start moving to okay, we need to get this game out now. And so we kind of set ourselves a deadline for when we want to launch the game.
Right.
Yeah. And so that pushes us to do all the videos, marketing type stuff, setting up the Kickstarter page. And so we try to stick to that deadline, because if you don't stick to the deadline, you can just keep pushing it out. And so, yeah, with Blubber Master, Yamcha, and Dirty Laundry, we just set a hard deadline and we just work towards that. And yeah, so that's more or less how we go about it.
Yeah, I think that's great, right? Like, it's something there to drive a sense of accountability. I think, like, through chatting to a lot of solo designers before yourselves this evening, a lot of it was like either some like to work really creatively and they'll wait for their moment of inspiration, and others are like, because I'm not working with somebody, I'm not accountable to somebody else, I need those deadlines in place to help make sure that things are progressing in a smooth way. So I think that makes complete sense in terms of having a deadline, and once you kind of plant that flag in the ground, you can work backwards from there. Just out of curiosity, like how far in advance is your deadline typically? Like how much room do you give yourselves from finished ideation to we want this game out in market? What does that typically look like?
Yeah, I think it depends on the game. So,
Yeah, so I think over time, as we've developed more games, we've realized that there's certain aspects that we need to take into consideration. For example, how long it takes to print, how long, it takes for the printers to provide us with like sample copies, etc. And so we need to kind of factor all of that into our timeline. And so I think at the moment we are aiming to release 1 or 2 games every year,
Fantastic.
and get those fulfilled at the same time on Kickstarter. And so we try to kind of just work backwards from that.
yeah, because we've done a few games now, I think we've got like a time frame that we kind of know that we can hit, and like how long does it take me to do the artwork, how long does it take to do the Kickstarter page? Like that includes like taking the photo, doing the video, doing the text, doing the instructions, doing all that. That takes a whole heap of time. And then yeah, trying to work towards like those deadlines. Yeah, just I guess just breaking it down into like small chunks so that we can work our way through them, and then hopefully we get something at the end of the day. So like at the end of the process, we can glue all those little pieces together, and then we've got this finished product.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And even like, breaking it down into chunks helps make the workload more manageable as well, doesn't it? Right? Like it doesn't look like this great gargantuan task. Like, you're done 4 games now, you know what you're doing, but you can be really systematic about how you allocate time to getting to that next checkpoint. Out of curiosity, again, to kind of lead back on a similar thread to playtesting, how do you then divide and conquer the work amongst yourselves? Like, do you find that there's different ebbs and flows where, like, Jono, you'll take the lead on something, so you might be invested more at the start of the project, and then Ando, you might come in a few months later and you'll have a part there? Or I guess, yeah, how do you balance the work to make sure that you're obviously like you're ultimately maximizing like what your individual skills are, but it's done in a way where the workflow is systematic, that means that you're not burning out as well?
Yeah, it's a balance to not burn out, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess because it's like a team, you got to be able to let go of who does more work and go, okay, I'm good at this. It may be more labor intensive, like me being the sole artist. I do
Yeah.
a lot of I do all the artwork, I do all the
Awesome.
graphic design. So
Yeah.
I do all that, but I'm happy to like be doing that and not like, oh, I'm doing all the work, I'm doing all the hard work, and you're not doing any of it. Like I'm
Yeah.
happy to go, okay, I'm doing this is my job to get the product out there. I have to do this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, that's how we kind of divide it that way. We just go, what can we do? What strengths and weaknesses do we have? Work towards that, and then at the end of the day, we want a finished product. We have the same goal. So how do we achieve that? I think, yeah, be happy with like you don't need to split the workload 50-50.
Yeah, it's absolutely key, right? And like, I think on that, as you say, it's knowing who you are and not trying to be somebody who you're not, knowing that your brothers, you've grown up with each other. Like, you can be just so authentic with each other that, say, Ando, I'm going to take the lead on this. John, I'm going to take the lead on this. And there's no politics or there's no game. Like, you're just really comfortable with what each of your wheelhouses are. And I think that's why, in this case here, like the partnership works, right? Because there's no conflict with, I should be taking this or I should be taking that. And yeah, there's certainly feedback given. I think this game mechanic could be better. And I'm sure, Ando, you'll have some feedback with different artworks or how different things could come to life as well. But as long as there's that really clear delineation between I do this, you do that, this is how it all comes together, then yeah, I think for a partnership that's super important. Is there anything in terms of the process now that, as you reflect on for game 4, that is materially different to what it was for game 1? And why is that the case?
Can you say that again in different words?
That's all right. So it's essentially, I guess, knowing that you're 4 games in now, it feels like it's a very systematic process and it's a very well-oiled machine. What do you think, if you were to go back as first-time designers, what do you probably wish you knew now for your first design, in a way, in terms of how you've got to it being a well-oiled machine?
I don't think I would do anything differently, because it's all part of the learning experience from designing the first game,
Yeah.
stumbling, not knowing where we should get our games printed, etc. And I think learning that process was quite necessary.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we're still learning with even though we're on our 4th game, we're still trying to launch
Yeah.
game number 5 and 6.
We've
And
finally started the networking, which is why we're on this podcast with you, Andrew.
But that's a learning in itself, right?
That's
As well.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
So we are definitely learning.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really change our process. I think it's just being open and listening to people and just, I mean, criticizing ourselves, listening to each other. I think that has been the biggest part of our journey. Just learning off each other, learning from others, and just continuously refining the process.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned from like my work as well is that it's really important to reflect and go back and talk about what worked and what didn't work, and then just refining that process over and over, that iteration process. I think that's how we get into that machine. All the cogs are
Absolutely.
turning.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess like, and it's like a probably beautiful segue in some ways, right? That like as you reflect on where you are now, like 4 games in, how does that then feel where you want to go to as well? Because for a lot of people, especially as a first time designer through COVID, like having 4 games out there that you've successfully funded, like is a vision of success, right? Like that would have been your vision of success at some point. So how do you reflect on the journey, the learnings, the role that you've carved out, the successes, to then use that as fuel to where you want to get to?
The biggest success is to see people smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they play our game and they enjoy it, that's the biggest success for us. That's what's keeping us doing what we're doing. So I don't think I think success is different for everyone. I think that's
Yeah.
what it's for us.
So no, likewise, because I think with the first game, Carry On, we saw our friendship group enjoy our first card game that we designed, and that's what inspired us to just go ahead and kickstart it on, yeah, back in 2021, and then that got funded, and then friends were saying, oh, you should make a sabotage game, and so we designed Dirty Laundry, and then they had more fun. And then I played with one of my former managers, and he swore his lungs out, and I was like, this is amazing. And so it's that feel that keeps building on top of each other that keeps us going. And then like with Yamcha, when we went to PAX last year, we had hundreds of people attend our booth and played it, and everyone just had a smile on their faces after they play tested our game.
Yeah, they walk past and they go, Yamcha!
That's
And
brilliant.
so just seeing more and more people enjoy it has been keeping us, in this process and designing more games.
Yeah, we just want to spread the smiles to everyone we can. That's why we named Quokka Games, because it's, Quokka's got smiles on their faces.
Again, the simplicity of that, right? But again, I think the beautiful thing there is like you can articulate that so clearly what success looks like. And I think the really beautiful thing about that articulation is like you're living that at the moment. Like that's not a future aspiration at all. That's something current that gives you fuel to keep investing time, energy, and resource into this, right? So I think how you've articulated that is so apt, and then you've built a brand around it as well, right? So yeah, a really succinct and beautiful way of encapsulating what the whole adventure is about. And you mentioned their packs in particular. Keen to understand a lot more about that journey as well. I know you said like Yumcha was indie showcase game, but just run us through that whole process of, I guess, being shortlisted, winning, and the whole PAX experience.
It's an amazing process. So we kind of just applied to PAX because it was mentioned by our friends that there's this exhibition that you should apply for, and so we submitted Yumcha without expecting much, and then they more or less shortlisted us and announced us as winners. Then we're like, oh gosh, we have to go to Melbourne now, and so we're like, oh no, what do we do? Because PAX was our first convention that we ever attended. And so we were like, okay, let's try and just make sure we have some games to sell, make sure that we have some pins to give out. And so we more or less just had 2 suitcases and we flew from Brisbane to Melbourne. And then, of course, given how quickly everything came together, the flight was also cancelled on us.
Of course it was.
And so, not to name any airlines, our flight got cancelled, so then we had to kind of rebook that Thursday to make it for the Friday. And so
Yeah.
we each brought a suitcase full of yum cha. Um, and then we displayed our games there. The first hour, people just kind of walked by like, oh no, we brought too many copies to PAX now. They're not going to sell. We're
Yeah.
going to have to bring this back home. And then, yeah, as the day started going, yeah, ticking by, more people started coming over, started playing our games, more people started buying our games, and then it just kept getting busier and busier and busier. And by day two, we pretty much sold out both our suitcase full, which is
How good
amazing.
is that? That is brilliant.
And then day three, yeah, we didn't have stock to sell, and so
We scribbled on the piece of paper, buy now on our website.
free delivery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were making it up as we were going.
That's right.
And I think at the end of the day, it was again just enjoying watching people play our games.
Enjoying the process. Yeah.
And so yeah, no, PAX was a huge hit for us. And yeah, ever since the PAX event, I think word of mouth has gotten our games out there. More people have been buying it on our website, buying at retailers now, and
And we're selling overseas as well. The Canadian and the UK market, they picked us up a little
yeah.
bit.
Fantastic.
Like
Tell us
they're like,
more
oh,
about
this is,
how that happened, because that's a massive win to have an Australian
we don't
business selling
have any
games
retailers
across.
there, but we don't have any retailers there. But I think friends on Facebook or posted and it went a little viral, just a tiny bit viral.
Yeah.
So yeah, got a lot of purchases from the Canada and a little bit from the UK. So that was like, wow,
That's
we
brilliant,
reach
right? And
international markets,
oh,
international borders.
for sure, right? And you know that, like, to go back on the earlier theme, like there's going to be people halfway across the world who you've never met smiling playing your game, right? Like that's pretty cool.
It's like astronomical, and you're like, oh, they still want to buy it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think that, like, to kind of to go back on the theme of packs, it's like just put yourself out there, right? Like, to your point, you didn't know what to expect. Like, you brought a suitcase each. By halfway through the first day, you're thinking, what have I done here, right? Like, I'm in a foreign city. I'm going to this event for the first time, but you put yourselves out there, right? And it's funny how the universe has a way of rewarding us when we take a bit of a gamble. Yeah, an educated one, and of course, there's a good product to support it, right? It's so you had a few things going in your favor, but just taking an educated risk and seeing what can happen. But more importantly, not just watching smiles, but I'm sure both of you would have been having a few smiles yourself, even before the first sale, right? Just to
Yeah.
enjoy the process, enjoy the experience, and to learn something from it. And I think how you live in the moment a bit with this venture, yeah, is super critical as well to then fueling kind of what comes next. Which is probably, guys, I reckon my last question before I might ask yourselves if you've got a question for me or the community. But I guess where to next, right? Like, you've got like a really good process, you've got really good feedback, you've funded 4 games, you're ranged in Zing, which is fantastic. And everybody who's listening or watching, go to your local Zing. There's about 100 outlets across the country, and you'll find Yum Cha in there, which is great. Um, but knowing that you're so motivated by being in the moment, and that by that definition, you're successful now, I guess then how does that fuel how does that fuel your ambition? Or are you kind of so content that this is like your perpetual end state? Or how do you balance kind of then where you want to get to, knowing that you're having so much fun and so much success with your current story?
Continue sharing the love and laughters. And especially with Yum Cha and the upcoming game Boba Master, they're both themed around Eastern food, and that has been a huge hit for both of us. And I think we're probably slowly pivoting towards that more.
Yeah.
Just that cute food game, because, well, who doesn't love food and who doesn't love cute food?
Yeah.
And so,
Well, food with smiley faces.
yeah,
That's
food
the
is
theme.
Yeah.
Us with smiles.
Yeah.
And at the same time, our card games are quite educational as well. So with like Yamcha, it's multilingual. So we have the English translation as well as like the Mandarin. So for example,
That's
the English
fantastic.
translation, barbecue pork bun. Then you have the Chinese character as well as the Mandarin name and the Cantonese name.
Yeah.
And so I'm an Australian-born Chinese. My Chinese is not great, and so we decided to make a game that can teach me how to
That's awesome.
pronounce it. And so we found that a lot of people have enjoyed learning how to read and say food names in a different language. And so we're starting to, I guess, lean into that a bit more, sharing our Eastern culture with the West.
So I thought that everyone in Australia has been to Yamcha, but that's not the case.
And not everyone's had bubble tea before either. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a niche that we've come across, and we're going to continue hitting.
Fantastic.
And so I think, continue to share the laughter and also, I guess, our Eastern culture and food.
Which is incredibly authentic, right? Like it's authentic, it's consistent with your experiences. Again, like, gateway games that are simple, that are easy to play, that have a unique flair to them, right? And a unique flair that's very distinctive. So that when somebody comes across a Quokka Games game, they kind of know what it stands for, right? Like it's bigger than just the sum of the parts, the 4 games that there's a consistent flavor to them all. Pardon the pun. Before we kind of recap and close off, guys, is there any questions that like you have for me, or that you'd like me to pay it forward and ask the next guest or guests on the show?
Because I watched all your episodes, I understand the format. So you have 2 questions. So one to you, or I guess 2 questions, and you can answer whichever one you want. Is what's your take on Australia in the terms of where it's at in the board gaming industry currently, and what do you want to see happen in the future? And then I guess the second question is, do you want to ask?
Yeah, we'll ask the second question after you answer this.
Great. So that's a brilliant question. And it's probably one that I feel a bit of imposter syndrome answering it, to be honest. But because I feel like I'm reasonably new to the community still. But I'll give it a crack. I think there's a wonderfully vibrant, diverse gaming culture that we have in Australia. One that I've been very pleasantly taken aback by. I know we said before that my darling wife and I attended PAX as attendees for the first time on the Sunday last year, and we were blown away by it. We're just like, wow, like there's such a diverse mix of retailers, games, wholesalers, vendors, people play testing across all different types of games from all different types of backgrounds, on a spectrum of this is just a hobby and a creative pursuit to something that I've been working on for 5 years. And I really want to see how this can come to life. So I think just that all of that just packaged up into the convention center being absolutely full, and a mix of casual dresses to cosplayers. It's like, wow, like this is bigger than a subculture. Originally, I would have thought that it's a subculture, but I think it's bigger than that. And now, we met at a convention a few weeks ago, right? And again, wonderfully diverse mix there. That's some very like hardcore role-playing games versus games that are more like Footy Feud and our games, right? That are more to the gateway game aspect of it. So I think I've been really, blown away by, how big our gaming culture is. I think in terms of them, like where we'd like to see it go towards, I love the educational hook. I think that, like my socials aren't great. Personally, I don't understand Instagram. I don't understand TikTok at all, but we're all guilty of being on these things all the time, right? So it's like, and you see that play out, especially for someone like myself who's done a lot of kind of junior sport coaching. And, I'm lucky that Footy Food's educationally beneficial. So I've seen it kind of deployed in a few classrooms as well. And it's like, man, like games can be a real gateway for social connectivity. They just can be. And that's why when a lot of people have asked me, I might be going off a bit of a tangent here, but have you ever thought about making Footy Feud an app? It's like, well, no, because I think that actually goes against the whole idea of it, which is to embrace social connectivity for myself at a young age, for yourself for more casual gamers at an older audience. So I think for me, that's where I'd like to see it get towards. It right now, it's kind of seen as a bit of a, I guess, a quirky and different culture, but it's really big and a crapload bigger than I thought it was originally. But it still isn't seen as mainstream. So it's how can that become more into the mainstream? That it will never replace this. We know these things aren't going anywhere, right? And we're permanently attached to them. But how can games be a way of building both technical skill sets and social skill sets to fundamentally avoid some of the pitfalls of just communicating via emojis and actually being comfortable having a face-to-face conversation with somebody? So I think that's my unique take on it. But again, very big caveat that a bit of imposter syndrome because I feel like I'm only a very new entrant into the community.
I think I have to
What's your
echo a
take
lot
on
what-
that?
Yeah, I have to echo a lot of what you said just then, because we definitely saw like a lot of families like bringing their small children and all sorts of families, all sorts of like older people, younger people, all
Yeah.
like all walks of life really. They
Yeah.
all came to PAX, and we were just surprised about the diversity that was there. We were like blown away. We were like, wow, so many different people play games or had like interest in pop culture, and like yeah, we just like, because you kind of have like a stereotype in your head, and then
Yeah.
you're like, no, Australia is very diverse. Australia is very accepting, and everyone games almost. Like even my mum, she just plays Candy Crush like, all day long. So you know, everyone's a gamer to some extent. So
Yeah.
I think yeah. And then the
And
second point,
A
yeah, I
brilliant
think with
question, though. Yeah, really good
yeah, I
question.
think with our games, hopefully it helps with that as well, being gateway games, and somewhat educational as well. Like carry on, you have to add and deduct points. With Yamchan Bubble Master, you learn a different language. It's nice and fun, it's social, and so hopefully similar to you,
yeah,
we
we've,
hope
we've
that
been asked
more
that question.
people,
Yeah,
will pick up card games and interact with each other.
yeah, we've got that question too. Like, do you want to turn it into an app? We're like, I think that defeats the purpose of what we're doing. We're trying to get people to sit together and laugh together and just enjoy the interaction, you know, the social interaction.
Absolutely. It's a really clear mission purpose, isn't it? Right. And kind of once you kind of had that really clear compass that, no, this is what I want our brand to be known for in our games. It allows you to take a stand on things, right? And then kind of help make those choices that, yeah, this is what we will pursue because it's in line with our mission. But then equally, we're deliberately going to walk away from this because it's just not in line with what our value sets are. So, yeah, really valuable.
And the next question
Yeah, the next question.
for the next guest that you're gonna have.
Yeah. So the question is, you experience highs and lows in your game design process.
Yeah.
What keeps the momentum going for you?
Fantastic. That is a great question. And one that we all experience, right? So, but one that we all probably have a very different take on what the answer is. So, yeah, I look forward to asking our next guest that one in the next episode, which will hopefully be in a week or two's time. But yeah, thanks again, guys, for again like being so open with sharing about your journey, right? Like I think that like I love like there's so many kind of points to summarize, but overall I love the tangibility of you like to put smiles on people's faces. I think that's just such a really clear goal, compass, whatever buzzword you want to put next to it, that helps kind of how you then direct effort towards the venture. What gives you continual motivation and continual momentum to almost, answer your question, or how you would answer that question, I would hypothesize. To enjoy the moment, enjoy the process, but then create a bigger brand that enables you to make choices and trade-offs as a result of that. But I think to kind of dive into some of the themes that I really got out of it, I think just that clarity on we're gateway games and we want our games to be simple and fun that people smile with. Like that's super powerful. And a phrase that I use a lot in my career, I try to, because I work with heaps of numbers as well, is how do you make the complex simple? And I think like having a brand that you would have had so many different thought bubbles with what you want your games to be able to articulate it so simply so people just get it and it's compelling. Like don't underestimate that power. That's really good. But I think that then how you then make sure that infiltrates part of your decision making process as well, right? So going back to the example before about you'll receive conflicting feedback on playtesting, but you're looking at it through a prism of if we have a gateway game where the objective is to be fun, are we going to take this feedback on board or not? Or if it is conflicting, which side of the ledger are we siding with? So I think that's incredibly valuable. And then I think after that, like the way how you both work together, but just that aspect of resilience. Like you need to be able to create an environment where your friends and family feel comfortable critiquing, right? And you need to be resilient and you need to be vulnerable with having permissibility for that space. And then also how you work together as well, right? Where Jono, you put your heart on your sleeve and you showcase your great designs for Anna to turn around and say, well, this works, but these 5 things don't, and here are maybe 2 solves for it. I'm putting words in your mouth here. So I think that resilience through, how that comes together is also really key. And I think the last 2 things for me is, again, like how you keep yourselves accountable. So for yourself, like that's that deadline. Then you kind of have worked out a process between the 2 of you with what takes the lead on what, and a bit of the X's and O's, the mechanics with how you make that timeline work. But you have a timeline, you have a deadline, and that's what keeps you on track. And then the last one is having a crack, but having a crack with a smile on your face. Seeing everything as a learning, not everything is going to work out, but hey, when you have a crack at attending PAX and you end up winning an award and selling on in game 2, like, that's a risk that's worth taking, right? And again, it only happened because you were vulnerable. You leant into the prospect of failure. That takes resilience. And you just thought, why not? Why not with a smile on your face? Let's see what it can do. And you saw what it could do accordingly, right? That's resulted in widespread distribution, both locally and overseas. So fantastic. Was there anything that I missed there?
So beautifully.
Anything that I missed in that summary, you reckon, guys?
I think you hit the point.
You hit the point.
Yeah, you hit. Wow. You summed up. Yeah. However long we talked in like that concise summary, it was great. I don't know. Yeah. I think that's what we're all about as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll just take this snippet and then use it as advertisement. And this is what we are. Andrew William has said this.
Yeah. That's great to know, though, God. But again, right, like you can clearly join the dots when the dots are so consistent. And I think don't underestimate that power as well, right? That you created something that you know what you want to be, but you're also living it at the moment, right? So there's not a massive delta between your current story and your future story. Yeah, it's always how you can scale it, right? But the clear foundations aren't going to change all that much. And that's equally really powerful as well. So you're fantastic. So guys, again, that probably wraps us up for tonight's show / today, whenever you're watching / listening. Again, looking to build a community out of borderline genius. So hit subscribe, any comments, builds, likes, feedback, what you liked about the questioning, etc. Builds for next time. Really looking to grow it internationally as well. So please don't hesitate to drop us a line below, and we'll see you next time.